Hi, I'm Pastor Kathleen Panning, the Tilted Halo, and I'm going to share some things with you about Advent. Advent is a season in the time of the church. For those who observe the church year, it's the beginning of the church year. So Happy New Year in one sense. Um, but it's also a time of preparation, a time of anticipation, time of faith and joy. Uh, it's got many different layers to it. I grew up in a faith community, Lutheran background, and every year during this time, the congregation had an Advent wreath, and it has four candles around the wreath and a fifth one in the middle. And I'll be talking about each of those candles in the coming weeks. And it's a tradition that dates back into, I think, the 1800s in Germany, where I can't remember who it was, but uh, the first Advent wreath was a wagon wheel, apparently with four white candles, one for each of the Sundays, and then red candles for each day in the week in between the Sundays. So up until Christmas. Advent always starts on the first Sunday after November 30th, or 4 Sundays before Christmas. And as I said, it's a time of preparation. And the first candle, which is what I'm going to talk about today and kind of the theme for this week, is a candle. It's had a couple of different names. Sometimes it's called the prophet's candle because it's a time in a lot of readings in some churches deal with the readings from the prophets and remembering the prophets of the Old Testament as people who were anticipating and waiting for Messiah to come. And along with all of the people of Israel, of course, and especially the prophet Isaiah was one who had a lot of writings about the coming of the one who was promised by God. It's also, because it's a time of waiting, been called the candle of hope. And I got to thinking about that the other day. Actually, it was last night, to be honest with you. Hope. Hope is always forward looking. Hope doesn't look in the rearview mirror. Hope is about what is yet to come. The Apostle Paul talks about hope as things that we don't see, we do not yet have. It's about the future and forward into that future. Hope is about what is not yet. And that reminded me of the writings of Dr. Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist from Stanford University. And her work for education and for relationships and for all kinds of human interactions is about the power of yet and not yet. And changing the way we think about failure or things that don't go right, and thinking about them instead of, oh, that's so horrible. It can never change. It can never be any different. That person will never change their ways. Perhaps they won't, but perhaps they could. And there are studies that she did, and scientifically based ones, about helping children in schools change their thinking from, I can't do this. I failed that test. I'll fail every test. I'm lousy at math. I can't do it. That kind of a mindset, which she calls a fixed mindset. It's, something didn't go right once and it's never going to go right ever again. Or that person didn't like me, at that point, or said something nasty to me, and that's the way they're always going to be. That's the way somebody's always going to behave in a relationship. It's a fixed mindset. But to think about things like to change the understanding of, oh, that math test was really hard, or I don't get this. And as way of understanding how to do a computer, how to do math, how to do anything in our lives. Really, it's not just schoolwork, but it's anything. A work assignment, something in our relationships that isn't quite clicking and syncing right, or the way we'd like it to be. And to think about it, well, that's not working yet. The idea of a growth mindset is to think about building on things and progress. It's to, instead of praising kids for, oh, you got an A, how wonderful, and then expecting them to always get an A or B or C or whatever the grade is. And um, instead of praising somebody for what they've done, but to encourage students, if that's what we're talking about, for the work and the progress they're making. Somebody who's writing a report, maybe it's not the way you want it to be right now. It's got some flaws in it. It doesn't really look the way you want it to be. Instead of coming down hard on somebody for that, say, okay, thank you for what you have done. The work, the basic information is there, but now we need to get it to look like something that can be presented to a client. It's not quite there yet. That gives someone the opportunity to grow, to change, to see something new. It's forward looking. It's the idea that there's something more out there and I can get it. There's something more out there. I can do it. When we think about that in relationship to faith, it's a relationship of there's something more out there that God is bringing, and this world is not finished yet. This congregation, great people, mostly, type of idea as a pastor. This working with this colleague, he's got some good, strong points, or she does, but there's some things that aren't quite there that we like. So it's the idea of the future. There's more possibilities there for us. There's more possibilities there for the people around us. There's more possibilities for God's love and grace within us, within our faith communities. God's not finished with us yet in the most positive sense. Sometimes people use that as something to beat people over their head and say, God's not finished with you yet, meaning God's going to punish people. That's not what this is. This is God's got something more, and it's juicy and it's good. It's not finished yet. We're not finished yet. God has more in store that's wonderful, gracious, and good for us. It's not completed yet. That's the promise of Advent. The idea that God's promises to us are not completed yet. There's more good there, and God will do as God has promised. And when we don't think of that, when we forget those things and think of, oh, it's never going to work, or this congregation, this person, this whole idea is just trash. We got to cut our losses, and sometimes we need to cut losses, yes, but to get rid of something or do, it's a failure, it's doomed, it's nothing like this is ever going to work before. Have you ever heard that one? Oh, we tried that once before. I've heard that many times at a congregation, meaning we tried it once, it didn't work, and so we're never going to try it again, and because it won't work again. That is not living in not yet. It's not there yet. God's promise isn't fulfilled yet. There's more, something wonderful that God has in store for us. It's the promises given through the prophets. It's a promise given through the baby who was born in Bethlehem. For those of us who are Christians, thinking about Jesus' birth, it's the promise of Easter. It's the promise of all that God is. It's the promise even for now, for this present time. God isn't finished with us yet. There's more. There's wonderful things pulling us forward into the future, not slamming us backwards, but always pulling us forward into God's good future. And when we don't think of that, I almost forgot what I was going to say about that. When we don't look at that, when we say it can't work, when we think of, it's never going to happen, those kinds of feelings and thoughts, when we don't have an idea of it's not yet God's time, it's not yet happened, that person isn't God's perfect being yet, or better yet, type of idea, when we fail to keep in mind the future and the hope that's there, the not yet idea, we're thinking way too small about God. We're thinking, this moment in time, the past and the current time, defines everything about the future. And if that had been true, then, Isaiah and all of the prophets would have been, foolish people talking about a promise that was never going to be, if it was only defined by the past and the present. God is much more than the past and the present. God is the culmination of everything. God is pulling us forward with hope. That's the promise of the first Sunday of Advent. It's about hope. It's about God's not yet. It's not here yet. There's more to come. And we need to now get ready, to be ready, to be a little bit more of the people God created us to be and calls us to be. It's about not yet, not quite yet, but we're getting closer. Advent is a time of not yet. Christmas is not here yet. Not yet, in spite of what the stores tell us and everything else, but it's not yet. God's promises are sure. And when we forget that, we forget the hope, and we forget to live in God's not yet. So the first candle of Advent is about hope. It's about preparation. It's about waiting. It's about not yet. Waiting is not just sitting still and doing nothing. It's preparing, yes. Not with all the frantic activities that most of us do for Christmas, but it's preparing our hearts and our minds, looking at ourselves. What are the things that are holding us back? What are the things that we need to maybe let go of in the preparation to work our way closer to being who God created us and calls us to be? We're not there yet. God's not come back again yet, but the promise is sure. So live in the hope. Live in as people of the not yet time. Until next time. And there'll be another video for next Sunday and the week of that time to prepare us for what that candle is about. And I'll let you know when that time comes. So until then, peace and grace to you.